Oia, aloha kākou. E hoʻomau aku kākou I ka kākou mauhana o keia pule. We're going to jump into the ʻike Aukahi session, and we'll be looking at ka moʻolelo, ʻŌlelo Hawaiʻi. Yeah, like a history of ʻŌlelo Hawaiʻi. We're going to break this up into 2 parts over 2 weeks. I keia pule, we'll be going over part 1. Okay, so before we jump into it, we'll just kind of set the scene a little bit, right? Hiki mai ka poʻe Hawaiʻi, long time ago. And as Makua Laiana would remind us in the 1800s that Hawaiians have a very ancient language. And so in this society that our kupuna built, right, like in many, language was very important. Our use of it, though, was oral. Right, we didn't have a written language. We didn't have paper. However, we did see, you saw symbols, right? We can think about things like ki'ipohaku or petroglyphs. We can think about things like, kapa designs and so on and so forth that have meaning. Yeah, but when it comes to words, right, ʻŌlelo Hawaiʻi was oral. Our traditions, our stories, our histories, our mele, our songs, our chants, these are all passed down orally. And so a huge component of this, of course, was memorization. And we can look back at just a quick moʻolelo, like the kumulipo, for example, which is not really a quick moʻolelo. It's over 2,000 lines long. But the story is that the kumulipo was composed by Keaulumoku, who kind of nodded his head, closed his eyes, thought for a while, and then looked up and recited the kumulipo from the beginning to the end. And it said that although he was the composer, he wasn't necessarily the one who memorized it, right? That job was given to someone else who listened to what Keaulumoku had composed and was reciting and memorized it. And that's how the kumulipo has been preserved until today. Obviously passed down to another person, and here we are in 2022, still chanting that mele. And so that's the scene. Yeah, that's kind of the setting that we're in. And in 1778, we have Captain Cook, right? And he comes here, and ʻike oia I ka ʻaina laʻe, right? He's been all over, and he's blown away because he's never seen a land, a people so clean and so productive. And again, this society, right, is a society that is built on ʻŌlelo Hawaiʻi, right? These are Hawaiian language speaking people, and this society has created a sense of sustainability that at this point we only wish we had. Okay, so Cook comes in 1778, but with him comes this thing of literacy, right? This practice of scribbling, writing on a piece of paper, perhaps at the back of the ship, handed it off to someone, taking it to someone all the way on the other side of the ship, and that person, through looking at the paper, understanding what the person on the other side needs or wants or is communicating, right? And Hawaiians see this, they recognize this, and they're pretty interested in it, right? So to a certain degree, this may be the first experience with reading and writing. And then from that point on, we have more people who continue to come into Hawaii, And in 1793 and in 1810, through George Vancouver, kākau o Kamehameha I kona inoa ma ka pepa. Kamehameha signs his name on paper. And these are letters being sent off to King George of Great Britain. Kamehameha is asking for a ship. He asks for one, doesn't get a response, and sends off another one again later. And so the image that we're seeing here on the screen is actually Kamehameha's signature from those letters, right? And we can see the use of a T instead of a K. And so we see Kamehameha. And so obviously, the ali'i recognizes the function and I guess the power of writing. And so this is something that Hawaiians continue to kind of dabble in a little bit, right? So it's not just missionaries come and all of a sudden we see this whole new world, right? We've had these interactions with people from Cook and many thereafter. And so Kamehameha, again, in 1793 and 1810, is actually signing his name on letters. And so in 1814, kākau o Henry Opu Kahaia I puke pela a I puke vehevehe. Right, in 1814, Henry Opu Kahaia begins writing a spelling book and a small dictionary. And this actually makes it into the hands of the missionaries who eventually come to Hawaii a few years later. And a lot of the work that they do here in Hawaii is based on the work previously done by Opu Kahaia. And so we get to the missionaries. As many of us probably know, they arrive here in Hawaii in 1820. And in the first couple of years that they're here, well, first of all, right, they're granted permission by Liho to stay here for a while, with the idea that we would see how these teachings go, and then perhaps they'd be allowed to stay longer, which of course they were. And so during these first couple of years, pa'i ia ka puke ʻŌlelo pela ʻŌlelo Hawaii mualoa mai ka hana o Pukahaia. Right, as I just mentioned, Opu Kahaia provides a platform, a foundation for some of the work that they are going to move forward with in Hawaii at the permission of the ali'i. And so a spelling book is published in 1822, the first one. And again, this is done upon the work set up by Opu Kahaia years prior. And Liho, who is the mo'i, the king at that time, right, because Kamehameha passes away in 1819, he decides to send off teachers into the different districts across the island to a'o I ka palapala, to teach literacy. And so we have these schools popping up all over the place, and not like the schools that we're thinking of today, but these little groupings, these little halau, where Hawaiians were learning how to read and write. Liho, unfortunately, passes away in 1824 while he is in London, passes away from measles, and his younger brother, Kamehameha III, Kamehameha Ekolu Kawikiauli, he becomes king. And so when he takes the throne, right, even though he's not really acting as ruler, that power falls with Ka'ahumanu and Kalani Mokuma, but he is the mo'i, he is the king, and he gives a speech in front of his people, in front of the hu, Mekamaka Ainana, and he declares, Heaupuni Palapala Ko'u, right, that my nation is a nation of palapala. And this use of palapala is not just literacy, not just, reading palapala and writing palapala, but this idea of education. That my kingdom will be one of education, one of educated individuals. And so we move forward, we continue with these schools and this learning of reading and writing. And it was said that Hawaiians were so interested, so fascinated with this new idea, this new technology, that of course, the production couldn't keep up. And so it said that Hawaiians were equally adept at reading right side up, upside down, um, anyway, because there were multiple people reading the same book, right? There wasn't enough, material for one per person, and so you'd have one person with the material, others looking at it from all different angles, but still, of course, going through the process of reading and writing. And so in 1834, this idea of palapala kind of goes to the next level. And so in 1834, we have the first Nupepa ʻŌlelo Hawaii printed. Yeah, the first Hawaiian language newspaper is printed. It's called Kalama Hawaii, and it's published at Lahaina Luna School on Maui. And between 1834, when this first newspaper was established, and 1948, there were well over 100 different Hawaiian language newspapers that were circulated throughout the islands, right? Not all at the same time. Some had long-lasting lives and some were a little shorter. But again, throughout this time, we had well over 100 newspapers circulated throughout Hawaii in a 114-year span. And it ends in 1948 because that's the last time that Kahokuo Hawaii, which was the last newspaper, was published. And we'll kind of get into, why that was a little bit later. And so now this idea of reading and writing continues to increase, and it results in 1840 in Ke Kumu Kanawai o Lua Ehu, the first constitution of the Hawaiian Kingdom. And this constitution was passed, it was ratified in Lua Ehu, Maui. And so Kamakau refers to it as Ke Kumu Kanawai o Lua Ehu, maybe more commonly known as the 1840 Constitution, right? And so we're not going to get into what this Constitution does, but again, this is all done maka ʻŌlelo Hawaii, yeah? In 1841, we have the institution of the Department of Education, right? Again, building off Kauikeoli's proclamation of in 1825, where he says, He Puni Palapala Ko'u. And this is the beginning of compulsory education in Hawaii. Under David Malo in 1840, Maui already had compulsory education, but in 1841, it becomes compulsory throughout the Pai'aina, right? All keiki between certain ages were required to go to school. And this Ke'ena Ho'ona'awao, this Department of Education that is established, is the same Department of Education that stands today, right? It's just, unfortunately, under the control of different powers. And so there's this increase, again, in school, in resources that go towards this education. And again, all of this being done completely in ʻŌlelo Hawaii. In 1843, or actually in 1842, Kauikeoli, Kamehameha III, sends off some diplomats to America and France and Great Britain. He sends off Timoteo Ha'alilio, William Richards, George Simpson, and maybe one not so well known, JFB Marshall. And they head out to meet with the different governmental powers of these world powers at the time, the countries I just listed. And on November 28th, 1843, Hawaii is recognized as a sovereign, independent country, equal to the likes of America, France, Great Britain, all the powers of the world. And this recognition comes from France and Great Britain through the Anglo-French Proclamation, signed at the Court of London on November 28th. And again, this day became known as La Ku'oko'a, or Hawaiian Independence Day, a day that we continue to celebrate today in 2022. And so again, here we have this small little island country in the middle of the Pacific, the most isolated landmass inhabited by Kanaka in the world, speaks Hawaiian, right? A country, society built on Hawaiian language, and they are recognized as equals to what are the world powers at that time. Belgium quickly signs on after 1844. America recognizes Hawaii's independence through treaty. And over the next 50 years, we have more and more and more treaties between the Hawaiian Kingdom and other countries of the world. And in 1893, when Hawaii is illegally overthrown, when the government is illegally overthrown, Hawaii has over 90 embassies and consulates throughout the world. Now, the point of this, of all of these, the build up to this is, even though one might think it's not super connected to language, is that this is a society, a country, right, that functions through ʻŌlelo Hawaii. And it functioned so well that they were able to start up their own Department of Education. They were able to start up, what is it called? They were able to be recognized as a sovereign, independent country. And there's so many other things that we can talk about. But the point is that it proves to us, right, that ʻŌlelo Hawaii has no limits, no limitations, right? We can't, it's not that we can only do less because our country speaks Hawaiian, not English, right? We were able to accomplish many things just like those of English-speaking countries, and many times before those of English-speaking countries, right? If we go back to the Department of Education, Compulsory Education, 1841, at that point in time, only Massachusetts had compulsory education in the so-called United States of America, right? And so the Kingdom of Hawaii, the Hawaiian Kingdom, was ahead of the rest of the so-called America in that regard. And we were able to acquire independence. We were the first non-European country in the world to be recognized and to be admitted into the family of nations. And this happens before other countries like China, Japan, India, Canada, right? So on and so forth. And so we enjoy the freedom of independence, of self-governance from 1843 until 1893. But in that year, 1893, as many of us probably know, Queen Liliuokalani was illegally overthrown by a group of haole businessmen in Hawaii, but not without the aid of the American military, right? John L. Stevens, Minister Plenipotentiary here in Hawaii for America, orders Marines from the USS Boston to assist in the overthrow, which is the only way that they were able to succeed in their efforts. And on January 17th, the Queen is overthrown and a provisional government is established. Again, with the military assistance and power of the United States of America, making the act illegal and an act of war because, as I mentioned previously, 1844, America officially recognizes Hawaii's independence through treaty, and we have many treaties between the United States of America and Hawaii between that time and this time in 1893. However, against all the resistance and organized resistance of Hawaiians, America and this provisional government moved forward with their takeover and control of Hawaii. This provisional government attempts to annex Hawaii to America in 1894. That does not go through. Hawaiians were adamantly against it. In 1893, we have the Hui Aloha Aina that is established. You have Blount that comes in 1893 that conducts his report and reports back to President Grover Cleveland at that time, stating all the facts, right? That the provisional government lacks popular support, that their power exists only because of the assistance of the United States military and their power. And so this provisional government is forced to actually govern the country now. They weren't able to annex Hawaii to America quickly the way they wanted to. And so in 1894, that provisional government becomes the Republic of Hawaii. And just a few short years later, that same government in 1896 bans the use of Hawaiian language as a medium of education in all public and private schools. And this is Act 57, Section 30, and it states, "The English language shall be the medium and basis of instruction in all public and private schools, provided that where it is desired that another language shall be taught in addition to the English language, such instruction may be authorized by the department, either by its rules, the curriculum of the schools, or by direct order. In any particular instance, any schools that shall not conform to the provisions of this section shall not be recognized by the department." And so we see this not only in law in Act 57 and Section 30, but we also see this ban play out in society, right? And many of us, if not all of us, who have Hawaiian kupuna have stories or have heard stories of our kupuna being punished, right, for speaking Hawaiian in school. Whether they were shamed, whether they were physically punished and hurt. Many of us, again, if not all of us, have these stories today of our kupuna, right, kind of literally having the language beaten out of them. And so some would argue that, it was only banned in school, but Hawaiians could have spoken it everywhere else. But again, we have the stories that show that there wasn't such freedom. Yeah, that there were people in power in society that actually punished Hawaiians for speaking their language. And so this is perhaps the beginning of the loss of language. Hawaiian language schools were already decreasing prior to 1896 with the number of English language schools increasing, but this actually put it into law, and this was the nail in the coffin, so to speak, for Hawaiian language education. And so in 1897, this Republic of Hawaii, again, now that McKinley is president of the United States, they try to move forward again with annexation. The Hui Aloha Aina, the Hui Kalai Aina, the Hui Aloha Aino Nava Hine, Hawaiians far and wide across the country organize again, protesting the annexation of Hawaii to America. They send up a delegation made up of James Kaulia, David Kalani, William Auld, and John Richardson to the United States to present a petition protesting the annexation of Hawaii to America. And this petition, in a time where only 40,000 or so Hawaiians are alive, the Hui Aloha Aina collects 21,269 signatures, while the Hui Kalai Aina collects well over 17,000 signatures, right? So again, 40,000 Hawaiians alive. We got about at least 38,000 of them signing, and there may be duplicates between the two different petitions, but either way, that is a substantial majority of the people. And so annexation fails again. However, in 1898, America moves towards an illegal means of so-called annexation by passing a joint resolution called the Newlands Resolution, which has no power or authority outside of the boundaries of its territory, which Hawaii clearly was, as it was its own independent country that time, albeit under a foreign government, still a sovereign country. However, America uses this to annex Hawaii, and of course, they have the puppets in the Hawaiian government to go along with this. And so in 1898, in August, Hawaii, again, illegally, becomes a part of the United States of America through joint resolution. Now, America, in 1907, institutes this program for patriotic exercises, in schools. And really the motto, the theme of this was, as we can see here in this picture of these students at Ka'iulani Public School, right? Ka'iulani being he was the heir to the throne after Lili'uokalani, the school named after her. We see this theme: one country, one language, one flag, right? And so this program really promoted this type of mindset. And this is the type of education that many of our grandparents and parents, and maybe even ourselves, have gone through, right? One that, I guess, kind of indoctrinates American patriotism, false patriotism. We give our heads and our hearts to God and our country, one language, one flag. They weren't talking about Hawaii. They weren't talking about ʻŌlelo Hawaii. And they weren't talking about the Hawaiian flag, right? Talking about America. They're talking about English. And they're talking about the stars and the stripes. And so, again, this is where Hawaiian is really lost, right? Only one language. And so, again, many of our kupuna, our parents, and even some of us grew up in this educational realm. And with that, we forgot, we lost a lot of our history. You're not learning the story of Kovelo. You're not learning about Punia, right? You're not learning about the Hui Aloha Aina and all of those organized efforts and successes in protesting against the annexation of Hawaii to America. All we're hearing is Yankee Doodle, learning the United States presidents, the 50 states. We're not learning about Kamehameha and Liholiho and Kauikeaoli and Iolani and Kapua'iwa and Lunalilo and Kalakaua and Lili'uokalani, of course, unless it's in a negative light, right? Where we're talking about savages, uneducated, unenlightened, and so on and so forth, right? And so this program really, really takes hold, and we've seen, right, the results of this, and we'll get to that more a little bit later. Okay, so through this, through these efforts by the United States of America, right, purposeful efforts, not accident, not just going with the flow, Hawaiian language is dying off more and more and more because there are less places for it to exist, right? At this point, you have the household and you have the church. But again, seeing what's happening in society, right? The shaming, the punishment that's taking place, the socioeconomic status of those who don't speak English and those who do speak English, right, little by little, even in the household, these languages are given up. And again, many of us have either heard our parents or our kupuna talk about how, you know, their parents or their grandparents spoke Hawaiian, but they never taught it to them, right? They were always told, go learn English, go learn English. Not because English was better, not because English made any more sense, because it doesn't, but because, again, the society that they were living in had shown and proven that if they were to stick to their language, they were going to be in a struggle. And so many ohana made the decision for their keiki to not pass it down to them so that hopefully they could be more successful in society. And so there's a decline and a decline and a decline and a decline. And in 1957, though, Mary Kavena Pukui, Samuel H. Albert, Ho'opuka, the Puke Vehe Vehe ʻŌlelo Hawaii, right? The Hawaiian Language Dictionary. And it's the dictionary that many of us have on our shelves today. If we don't have it, we should definitely get it. Yes, we can access it online, but we should have this book on our shelf ready to grab whenever we want. And so the importance of this, again, we can get into later, but this is super necessary because, again, the language is being lost. And if this dictionary was not created, was not published at this time, who knows where we would be. Even though there were dictionaries published before this, you had the Andrews Dictionary, you got the Hitchcock Dictionary, and maybe a couple of others. But this is the one that's really, right, prevalent today. And so, but even while doing this, Mary Kavena Pukui was catching a lot of flack for her efforts. But mahalo yaya, thankfully, right, she persisted in her work, and we have countless generations who are going to be able to look back and mahalo her for that. And so in 1957, there's this beginning, I guess, to kind of preserve ʻŌlelo Hawaii from dying off further, because we've had already seen a huge drastic drop off from where we were in the 1800s to where we are now in 1957. And in 1978, there is a constitutional convention held in Hawaii, right? Hawaii, again, based on the illegality of the overthrow and the annexation, illegally becomes a state in 1959. In 1978, there's a constitutional convention, and in this constitutional convention, the topic of official languages come up, and this is Article 15, Section 4, and through it states that English and Hawaiian shall be the official languages of Hawaii, except, of course, that Hawaiian shall be required for public acts and transactions only as provided by law. Okay, so there's a difference in requirement, but there's no difference in official status. English and Hawaiian shall be the official languages of Hawaii. Okay. So, maikai, right? Anakila, all good. Well, not necessarily, right? Just because you make it an official language doesn't mean that people all of a sudden know how to speak it again, right? We're dealing with 80 plus years, 90 years of, right, purposeful killing off of the language. And in that time, we got 3-4 generations. It's not easy to get back, as we know today in 2022. Here we are, right? 44 years later after that constitutional convention, working as hard as ever to restore, preserve, and normalize ʻŌlelo Hawaii. not only in our society, but in our households, in our families, right, in ourselves. Okay, so now ʻAha Pūnana Leo is formed. Yeah, and Ile Benyamina, Hokulani Cleland, Kauanoe Kamana, still with us in ʻAha Pūnana Leo. Larry Kimura, still with us at ʻAha Pūnana Leo. Noel Warner, Koki Williams, and Pila Wilson, still with us at Pūnana Leo. They meet on Kauai, and they organize the grassroots organization called ʻAha Pūnana Leo, right? And this happens in January of that year. And although Hawaiian is an official language, right? They discover that there are still legal barriers, not only for public education, but also for the use of Hawaiian in private preschool. But we have the formation of ʻAha Pūnana Leo. We open our first preschool in Kekaha, Kauai. And the concept, the educational concept there is different than what we have today, right? Teaching was conducted through Hawaiian with children who only know English, as many of our keiki come in today. However, the difference is that English was used along with Hawaiian in the teaching. And the success of that was not what we needed, right? Children were not learning ʻŌlelo Hawaii because English was used and they could rely on the use of English. This school shuts down pretty quickly. 2 new Pūnana Leo open up. One in Hilo, one in Honolulu, both in April in the same week. And the method of teaching used at these 2 schools is the method of teaching that we continue to use today. No English. ʻŌlelo Hawaii, wale no, from the very beginning, right? The first day your kid comes in, they might not speak a single word of ʻŌlelo Hawaii. They might not have heard a single word of ʻŌlelo Hawaii before, but it's completely in Hawaiian, right? And this, over the years, has proven itself to be successful. Maybe a little bit uncomfortable in the beginning, especially for parents, but successful, right? And so, but with all of these things, right, there's inadequate funding as we continue to experience today. And so this is where parent participation comes in, right? We have the inadequate funding results in strong parent participation via in-kind service. This would develop into what was called hana makua, or parent participation, which has developed into what today we have as ho'i ho'i honua, as hui ki pai pai, right? La ohana, so on and so forth. The parents have to be involved. And even if not for funding reasons now, right, just we've learned over the years the importance and the, I guess the significance of this kind of participation towards the progression of our efforts, yeah, and of our mission to restore, revitalize, and normalize ʻŌlelo Hawaii. And so we have these 2 Pūnana Leo, and of course, these kids are going to graduate, and then they're going to go to kindergarten. And in case you were wondering, there is not much of a point in learning Hawaiian in preschool if you're not going to continue it after, right? So they're going into kindergarten. They want Hawaiian language schools. But we see that these Pūnana Leo graduates are being put in kindergarten public schools and being assigned to the program referred to as students with limited English proficiency, a program for immigrants. So think about that, right? Hawaiian language speaking kids, most of them Hawaiian, in Hawaii, being put in a program for immigrants. Hilo parents refuse to send their children to this type of kindergarten. Yeah. And so there's this program started at Pūnana Leo Hilo, which was then and continues to be referred to as Ke Kula Kaiapuni Hawaii. Yeah, the Hawaiian Immersion Program, literally meaning Hawaiian Environment School. So the Pūnana Leo decides that the effort should be made to reestablish public education through Hawaiian rather than creating more preschools. And so again, this was a lengthy process, right? Many years in the making, many failures at the legislature, but always trying again until, I guess, becoming victorious in the efforts that we've dedicated ourselves to. And so finally, the state legislature passes a bill, right? Because again, we have to remember, we're looking at the year 1986, but we can't forget 1896, right? That law that bans the use of Hawaiian as a medium of education in public and private schools. 1978, official language of the state of Hawaii, it doesn't erase the 1896 law, right? An official language of the state of Hawaii is still illegal as a medium of education in schools. But again, through organized grassroots efforts led by Pūnana Leo and supported tremendously by our ʻOhana, right? A bill passes allowing Hawaiian as a medium of instruction in public schools. And first as a pilot, then as a bigger pilot, and then this, and then that. It wasn't just, oh yeah, go ahead and do it. But again, in little bits and pieces, and even with lack of funding, even with lack of support and resources, right? We were always able to prove the validity, the success of Hawaiian medium education until having the program that we have today. A pretty well established, I guess we could say, Hawaiian immersion program. We're not nearly where we need to be, right? Many of our communities are still lacking, to quote the Clarabelle case of a few years ago, reasonable access to Hawaiian medium education. However, we have a program in place, and many of these Kaiapuni schools that we have today, we have about 28 different sites across the islands. Many of these, the vast majority of these have come from Pūnana Leo, right? From communities that had Pūnana Leo graduates, and then those families going in and creating a Kaiapuni kindergarten and up program for their keiki to continue. Okay, so this is just a really quick breakdown of the history of ʻŌlelo Hawaii. Next week, we're going to get into more details, right? This is just, again, a brief recap of the what. What happened, what happened, what happened, what happened. Next week, we're going to get into really the more important question and issue, which is not the what, but the why. And when we understand the why of all of these things happening, we will clearly understand the why of all the things that we are doing and all the things that we still need to do to save our language. Yeah. So mahalo ya ʻokoa pou for putting your keiki in Pūnana Leo. You folks are actively participating in saving our language, in saving our culture, our history, our stories, all of the things that come through language, right? It's not just about speaking words, but the meaning of these words and the stories that they tell, and the culture that they've created, that provide. All of that is in ʻŌlelo Hawaii, and we will look at these things further next week. No leila, mahalo ya ʻoukou, oia ihola, keia mahele ʻike Aukahi, Ahui ho aku kākou. Aloha.